Good evening, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are, and welcome to SCA Coach's Corner. Tonight we have a great show. We're going to talk about, the hosts are going to talk about Chivalry on a Budget. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Duke Sean.
Hey everybody! Thanks for joining us again for Coach's Corner. I think it's going to be a really good episode for us tonight. Sometimes when we're coming up with some ideas, we don't really know what the impact is going to be and how people are going to relate to some of this stuff. And then Helga puts a random comment up on our page, and the internet explodes. And then we find out that this is touching all the feels. So what we're talking about tonight is Chivalry on a Budget, the economic effects of a variety of things that can make it difficult, that can be hurdles or obstacles in your path to chivalry in an attempt to become a knight or a master at arms. And there's a lot of different factors that play into that. We're going to talk about some geographical factors and obviously some of the economic factors that go along with that as well. But it's something that we wanted to talk about to kind of raise some awareness and possibly look at some solutions and some things that we can look at to help mitigate some of those things, both as peers and as unbelted fighters who are trying to make their way in the world. So tonight I am joined by one of our favorite coaches, Sir Helga. And we also have a few guests with us from around the society. We have Viscount Soren from Owertha up in the Alaska area. His Lordship Thorin from the East Kingdom, specifically the Nova Scotia area. And we have His Excellency Ryu from Manhattan, from the city. I don't know if it's Manhattan, but yeah, the city, New York City proper. We're happy to have all of them joining us here. And I think I'm just going to start at the top of the list to have them do some introductions. So, Soren, would you mind giving us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Sir Soren Jalberg. I'm from Owertha, West Kingdom, which is the state of Alaska. I've been in the SCA since February of 2002. Was knighted in 2010. And been active on and off since then.
All right, Thorin.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Honorable Lord Thorin McKinnon from Halifax, Nova Scotia in the East Kingdom. I've been in the society off and on since I was about 5. I've been active in the East since about 2012.
Nice. Ryu?
Evening, everyone. I'm Regent of Iron Skies. I'm from the Crown Province of Ostgard, which is the 5 boroughs, New York City. I've been playing the game actively for about 12 years, 6 of which I've been chivalry.
Cool. Excellent. So I'm gonna start with one of the most remote ones on this. So Thorin, how much does a plane ticket cost from Halifax to the mainland?
So that depends on where I'm going. The last couple times we've gotten me down to, say, Jersey or Massachusetts was about $400 or $500 round trip for the ticket. Plus add on that usually $50 to $70 each way for the armor bag, because I tend to travel with my kit in a goalie bag just to make sure I've got everything with me. That usually includes a couple swords, things like that, just to make sure something doesn't break on the trip. Or if in case if I'm driving, it's usually 10 to 12 hours from where I'm at to the next major area or event.
And you guys can't really drive. You're either flying or you're taking a ferry to the States, right?
You can drive. It's just long because it's not a straight shot. So to get from, for example, if I want to go to a practice in Maine, like if I want to go to Portland, I got to start in Halifax, drive up 6 hours, then drive back down another 4, give or take. Like if I want to drive to the next Canadian barony, I'm driving 12 hours because that's in Montreal, Quebec.
Right. And Soren, you got similar problems up there coming from Alaska. Pretty much anything you're going to get to central West Kingdom, I mean, that is a hell of a drive.
Yeah, it's probably a good 3 to 4 day drive if we take that chance. But flights, you're spending 6 to 8 hours flying, if not more, anywhere from $600 to $1,000, depending on the time of the season for a ticket. That doesn't include the rental car and all that stuff.
Yeah. And we were talking before the show, Ryu getting around the boroughs there. We don't think of somebody as, living in New York City as being, particularly economically hamstrung. But what were you saying, Ryu? It's an hour and a half to get from the city to the city.
Yeah. The joke we have here is that New York City is in fact an hour and a half drive from New York City. Just because the sheer size of the city in terms of like geographic mileage, but also when we want to get into and out of the city, there aren't too many spaces in New York City that you can really even have a practice, especially an indoor one. So a lot of times we have to leave New York City in order to go to a practice in, say, New Jersey, right? And when you do that, you have to pay a toll coming and going, or you're going to pay for it in time. And so those tolls for over the course of my tenure as a Squire came out to around $300 a month every month for 6 years. So roughly $20,000.
Yeah. And that's in, the largest city in the United States. But that's the thing is, we don't think about that sometimes. And then there's Helga, currently living in a remote part of California and having come from a remote part of California. So how long did it take you to get from practice from Quincy?
Quincy was anywhere from an hour and a half if I was driving real fast to 2.5 hours. And so my current commute to get to practice, there's a local practice, which is 45 minutes, or the closest practice is 45 minutes, and a bunch of back roads. So if there's not construction, it's 45 minutes. If not, well, take a gamble.
Yeah, because even getting into the greater Santa Cruz area, you've got that one road, and it's not a straight shot. That is not an easy road to get to. So that's some of the stuff that we're looking at. And there are, we just happen to have some folks that are from some of those remote areas. But I know for us, early to mid 90s, up in Billings, Montana, which is part of Artemisia. Billings, Montana is a 10-hour drive for me to get to. And there were a lot of folks up there at the time that, one of the things that we'd heard a lot of from up there was, the road to Salt Lake only goes one way. And when you have fewer people in remote areas, you can feel neglected. For sure. It's how does somebody in an area like that, in a remote area, how do we recognize them? How do they get seen the way that we expect members of the chivalry to be noticed? Renown is part of the accolade, but it can be really difficult when you get to a central kingdom event and you don't know that this car full of people drove 10 hours to be there, because they just kind of get caught up in the mix of everything else that's going on in this kingdom event. And so it can be kind of difficult to drive that far, not be seen, not be noticed, and drive home. And that can be demoralizing. And Soren, I know that's something that you guys deal with a lot up there in Alaska. And I know with you guys having a coronet list up there, the Crown of the West, typically they try to get up there as much as they can. But sometimes that's the only time the Crown gets up there in the rain is for coronet list. So you want to talk about how some of that plays into your path?
Yeah, we're very lucky in the last, I would say, probably the last 10 years. We've been really lucky to have the crowns come up for almost every coronet. But you're right. That's really, when I was up and coming, there was there was 3 knights. There was 1 knight, then 2 others got knighted finally, and my knight was one of them. And so, that was it. So there was no council, there was no talk. And so basically the only council they had is if one of them went down and talked about it. And then, the shiv down there would be like, we don't know them. We don't know these people. But we're very lucky with being able to bring the crowns up now and stuff like that. And then we just had our first Orthan couple win West Kingdom. So it was nice to have the crown here for a lot of small local functions that really changed the aspect of what the crowns were to the populace.
Nice. Thorin, how many people do you have in your local group?
Local group, if you're looking, I think the last paid member census we had is Rune Talon, and the area had about 100 people. Fighters, you're probably looking around 10 to 20. We've got a lot of service and A&S folks here.
Is that all through Nova Scotia?
Nova Scotia, PEI, and New Brunswick for the Maritimes tends to play together.
Okay.
So we try to schedule events around things that, we're not going to put a big thing in Nova Scotia if we've got something coming up in New Brunswick.
Sure.
Or something like that. We try to make sure that we can balance the load, so to speak.
Right.
And then if we got something farther out, like Montreal or Maine, we try to set up carpools.
Yeah. So you got 20 people in the area, but all those areas are pretty well spread out too, right?
Yeah, my local practice consistently is 4 fighters.
Right.
We might get 2 more, depending on if they're having a good week or not. We only have 1 active knight at the moment in Nova Scotia. The other one in the area is in Fredericton, currently recovering from knee surgery, and the other 2 we had in the area are unfortunately injured.
Right. Yeah. Ryan, what are the numbers like? Because I know there's no practice in New York City proper, right?
There's none in Manhattan currently. We have one in Broken Bridge, Brooklyn, on Tuesdays that we do in a public park. And that's good for things like foot traffic. And we probably get about a half a dozen people in armor when we do that. But the lights go off and it's outside. And occasionally the police stop us.
Because you just look sketchy, right?
Yeah, I mean, so that's another side effect of living in an inner city. I've had police draw down on me on my own property while I was loading and unloading my car because they didn't know what I was doing and thought that I was armed with actual weapons at 3 o'clock in the morning. So,
right. All right. So yeah, those are some of the issues we're looking at geographically. We had some other questions that came up. Helga, do you want to jump in with one of those hot button topics we had there?
I can. Give me 1 second. Let me pull up the Google Doc. All right. So we'll start with actually a really broad one. What are some of the hidden costs of the path to chivalry, and how can we help and address them with people that are actually struggling financially? Soren, you want to start this one?
Yeah. So hidden costs. Armor is not really hidden, but armor is definitely one of that. To be on this path, you got to have your own set of armor. Be able to travel a little bit, at least within your barony, making practices, or your principality within. Be able to drive. We have three principalities that you can, or I'm sorry, 3 baronies you can drive to here. But gas is expensive, insurance, everything, wear and tear in your vehicles. But one of those baronies is 6.5, 7 hours away. One is an hour or so away. So our practices, it's just armor and small stuff like that is your hidden cost. It's just your time, your money, your expense for vehicles, and or bus rides, or getting rides from people.
Thorin, you want to jump in on that one?
Mine's going to be similar to Soren's, talking about gas, wear and tear. Another thing that thinking about when you're traveling from remote areas is making sure you've got luggage and bags that'll actually keep your stuff secure when you're traveling, if you're flying or if you're going any kind of long distance. You don't want to have a cheap hockey bag that's going to break in the bottom of the plane and have your stuff flying out everywhere before you even get to where you're going. Something a lot of folks I know traveling is your helmet and your gauntlets and your gorget are always in your carry-on. So God forbid you're traveling somewhere and your stuff gets lost. You've got the stuff that has to be, for lack of a better term, fitted to you so you can still borrow stuff or something like that. But I think the biggest one for me was always travel time and gas, and make sure you have roadside assistance if you're traveling any kind of distance.
All right. I think Duke Tom had a good point on this one. One of those hidden costs that we don't think about a lot is there's health insurance, which is popping up in the feed here a little bit, but just time. That's a thing that we don't consider. And again, with like Helga was saying, if your closest practice is, even an hour away, and I think that's about where my practice is roughly an hour away. And, that's the sort of thing where you get to practice and you found out you forgot your fighting boots. I'm not driving home and then driving back to practice after that. And so, time is just one of those factors that has to be calculated into, whether or not you can and or want to get to practice. And health insurance, especially here in the U.S., that's a problem. There are people who, like someone said, like the idea that you could get injured doing this sport, and that's going to keep you from being able to have a job. The healthcare industry in the U.S. is I think everybody knows is a bit of a mess, and you can go bankrupt from an injury, and so that's some of the hidden costs there that needs to be taken into consideration.
There was a good comment also is a time away from your family. You go into practice every week and spending this time, and the drives is you're sacrificing time with family, with your significant other, your children if you have it. That's a time that you're giving up with them to do this. So that's one of the hidden costs that really just hit me when I read it.
I'm gonna echo that point. Like the you have to have a certain level of commitment to something, but that always costs somewhere else, right? Like time is infinite. You are finite, right? So like, how much of it are you capable of spending? How much of it are you capable of devoting towards this path? Especially if you work in like a retail industry, for example, right? If you're going and traveling to an event on a Saturday might have been the day that you made bank for most of your week. That might have been the time when you're getting those hours. So those things become cumulative, right? They add up, and your insurance, right? Your injuries, your things like that, those also tend to add up over time, right? We're not thinking about, like, okay, we're going to have to hit X number of practice, X number of events. Your body can only handle so much wear and tear before you have to make time for your wellness. Speaking from the perspective of someone who's had to have his knee reconstructed twice, and I have no ACL currently in my left one. You have to make that time in order to train, in order to not force yourself through, or you end up with permanent injuries that are going to cost you in the long run, and they'll tax you forever. Make an adequate allowance for you to both commit, like to the cost, but like don't pay more than you have.
Yep, those are some good things to consider. Helga, do you want to throw out that next one?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to touch on something first real quick when it comes to health. So we're talking about doing this on a budget. And yes, there are hidden costs that every single one of us are going to pay. We actually need to look at how this affects our more impoverished and or lower income communities. And health insurance and recovering from injuries is actually one of the most dangerous things that all of us face. And so one of the ways that we as knights can help our students is making sure that they're properly geared so they don't get injured and they don't have to take off the time on work. We can make sure that when they are injured and have to take time off work, we are showing up and supporting them. Like that whole Meals on Wheels thing, making sure that extra things around the house are taken care of. Our people that are in lower incomes don't have the side money to deal with that. And so the rest of us that have made it, in quotes, or have the ability to give back, that's how we take care of the community and continue to build it as knights and continue to have our fighting community remain healthy without losing lower income fighters for fear they will be injured and be out of work.
I'm going to throw out, just pile on that for just a second and say, and this is something we've touched about on other episodes too, the difference between being hurt and being injured. I think we as a community are getting better about allowing people to recover from their injuries. But we have to be very careful not to, like, when something like that happens and somebody does have an injury, that is not the time to tell them that they just got to tough it out and do more. Especially, as we get older, we don't heal as well. But even when you're young, if you don't let your injuries heal correctly to begin with, you're not going to be able to do this for the long term anyway. So we need to be better about not pressuring people to fight through injury and to do something stupid just to do, well, what I consider to be the best sport in the world. But like Helga was saying, we need to be supportive in those injuries and tell people that it's okay and we'll be here and we want you to get healthy so you can keep doing this. So I just wanted to pile that on real quick.
No. So one of the things that actually came in and that I think that we should all talk about is one of the people that commented on my post got told you can't be a knight on minimum wage. And they asked all of us to touch on this comment.
Well, I'll start with that. I mean, when the society got started, everybody was a bunch of, starving college students and they just kind of made stuff up in their backyard. But when the whole fighting community was, UC Berkeley, that was a little bit easier to just hang out with your friends and just do. And I've said for the longest time that I think in a lot of ways this society is a victim of its own success in this regard, where we everything has gotten better. The costuming is better, the armor is better, and like Helga was saying earlier, like those of us who have been able to accumulate those things and get that look that we're looking for, it can take a while. But the days, well, first off, college is a lot more expensive than it was back in the 60s too. The days of the idea of us like recruiting through like starving college students, those students just don't have they're burdened enough with college, let alone, trying to do an extracurricular activity, like we have here, which while it shouldn't be expensive, none of it's free. So that's some opening thoughts on that. So, Ryu, being from the city, you want to cover some of that?
So, New York City has the one benefit of having a higher minimum wage than a lot of the rest of the nation, but we're about 37% higher cost of living than the rest of the state of New York, which equates to about 78% higher than the rest of the country. So even though, we have, effectively, almost double the cost for our minimum wage, we have 70%, or more increase for our cost of living. You're talking $2,500 a month or more per individual. I don't know, many people who, if they're on a minimum wage, can afford most any hobby. Let alone one that is as taxing and time consuming, et cetera, as our particular sport is. And if they do have one of those jobs in which they can afford to do that, it's still, like we're talking about things like we're in apartments effectively. Most people are in apartments. If you play this sport with any level of seriousness in the city, not only do you have that cost, you probably have a storage unit that you're paying for monthly on top of that too. So like that I would also add to the previous comment of like hidden costs if you live in a city, right? You might split that unit with a number of other people if you have like a fighting household or something like that. The answer to how to offset a lot of those things, unfortunately, is kind of in the title of what we do. We're the Society for Creative Anachronism, right? So collectivism is the only way that we can kind of offset some of those costs. So part of it is about finding, those people. When I started in the game, I was fortunate enough that I met a local knight who was instructing. His name was Albrecht von Holstern. And Albrecht von Holstern ran a metal shop, and he outfitted my entire fighting unit, some 30 people that I had recruited into the game. And we paid for little more than the cost of materials because he happened to have all of the machines to do that. There is no way that we could have possibly, gotten the success we did or gotten as many people authorized in armor if it wasn't for the fact that he had outfitted this entire group of people. I don't know how it could have happened otherwise.
Thorin, you had some ideas on this?
Yeah, when talking about like the cost of getting into it, I mean, a lot of us when we look at the armor, and we think of, let's just say the stereotypical knight kind of persona that a lot of us when we were kids wanted to look at. We see the shining armor, we see the soup can knees, we see all the beautiful metal work that goes into a lot of the kits that we see. Like Ryu's recent war kit that he built is a perfect example of the level of artistry that we can put into this. But a lot of folks don't need to go that far. One of my best friends in the society, Edmund, when he came to my practice for the first time 6 or 7 years ago, he was in loaner kit for 2 weeks, disappeared for 2.5 weeks, came back with a full neck down plastic set that he built out of a rain barrel. He still fights in that to this day for at least the body armor, and he's added a wonderful tunic over top that hides most of it while he's saving the cost because he can't afford Lamellar or can't afford to upgrade it, but it's still a effective piece. And that's something that we can come back to in our society with the courtesy of, like Ryu said, he got helped for his guys. We can help folks get into it and show them how plastic works, how you can do cheap modifications to old hockey and lacrosse gear to get you on the field. Here's an old tunic I've had for 15 plus years that I don't wear anymore. This is your first tunic, and it's ways of keeping that forward because a lot of us when we started were gifted things or shown things that started us on our path, and then we can do it for the next generation.
Yeah, totally. I mean, a very simple tunic covers up a lot of sins in the armor department. And for those people that are just getting started, if all they can do is pickle barrel armor that they made themselves, if that's what they're going to show up in, I think, those of us with some experience, rather than just bitching about them, having pickle barrel armor, maybe I can just make them a pretty simple tunic to throw over the top of that so they can still be here, be part of it, and, not feel like they're being looked down on because, they don't have that look. Right. One of the other things that I think has gone a long way, and I think Ryan kind of got to this too, is, our barony has as a set of loaner gear. We have loaner armor. And I think loaner armor, that is owned by the group, I think is one of the most beneficial things we can do to make it easier for people to be able to get in and do this, because, once you get somebody, hooked on the joys of our sport, because, the sport kind of sells itself to some extent that way. But if you can get them in, let them actually do it and, decide whether or not they want to make that investment in it and want to put either the time in to make the pickle barrel armor or, to put the expense in to get something, that has a better look. There's just, loaner armor is just one of the easy things that we can do as an organization, as branches, that we have the resources there to put that together. That I think it's just the impact of that, the benefits of loaner armor just cannot be overestimated. Soren, did you have anything on that?
Yeah. So our barony, we just went through all of the 3 bags of Lona armor that were hand down and pieced together, and where you started selling pieces off. We just had a tourney auction to start rebuilding and putting together a couple of sets of actual usable loner gear to do that. Something I've always done is if anybody ever says they want to do this, I stop them and say, don't buy a single thing. Let's get you an armor. Let's make sure you want to do this, because everybody wants to fight. Everybody wants to throw a stick, but not everybody can take a hit. And so I don't want somebody to go out and especially, spend money, good money on things that they might not use. And also, I don't want to be in people's business on how much money they make. So, a minimum wage person, they should not have to be able to tell me they make so much an hour and they can't afford a helmet, or they can't afford this, they can't afford that. That is that's personally humiliating, I think, in a way. So we finding a way to help that and mitigate that, I feel would be a great direction as well.
Nice. All right, Helga.
All right, so I'm actually going to jump in with this. We've kind of gone back to the idea of keeping somebody in the society versus actually the pursuant path of knighthood, and so I'm going to use all these points to jump from. Largesse keeps a person here. It keeps our newer fighters in armor, and so we as knights have to support that community. And we also, by doing that, then give a person the ability to become more economically sound within the society. And so by helping take and ease some of that burden so they can figure out if they like to fight enough to pursue the martial path and everything else like that is actually very key to keeping our lower income people in the society enough as they become economically sounder to then pursue the martial path. Because I'm going to say the hard thing. It is very highly unlikely that somebody that is in a minimum wage job is going to be able to invest enough time to pursue the martial path because they have all the other things that we've talked about. They probably can't take all the weekends off. Can they afford gas? Carpool your happy ass off. Believe me, I did for years and still do today. But the idea of keeping somebody here long enough that they find a viable way outside of the society to then pursue the martial path is actually key to this. But I will say that it is going to be much harder to do it in a lower income bracket because we require a lot of time investment and the ability to recover from injuries, as we talked about earlier. So this is how we keep people in that, and then get them to the point of being able to pursue that path.
Well, and I think that kind of touches on something that Thorin and I were talking about earlier before we got on. There are some of these factors that are just a fact. Like I said, some of the minimum wage jobs you're looking at, maybe you're working nights, maybe you're working weekends, and you just can't get to practice. So one of the things we're talking about is, if you are traveling from Nova Scotia down to New England to get to an event, it becomes that much more critical to make the best of the time that you have when you have that time. And I know that seems kind of a broad statement. And it's not just a matter of, who you're talking to or you're connecting to, but just making sure that, if you as a fighter, if you schedule that time off to go to, one of your big kingdom events, you may have to choose which of those events you're going to go to, and it may not necessarily be Crown. In the mid realm, they have the Tournament of Chivalry, right? They got the TOC events that are designed for the chivalry to be available to the unbelted fighters, to get advice and and to try to get pointers on how to be better. And, for somebody that has limited time off available, you may want to choose going to a TOC where you have some direct contact with some of the chivalry, and then you can, get actionable information that you can go home and work on, rather than, taking your time off to go to a crown tourney and then go in 2 rounds and then just disappear. Right. So some of it is, it's the biggest bang for your buck. And, that's not necessarily always going to be the big flashy events. Sometimes it's going to be events that are going to be more beneficial to your path of chivalry. All right. Thorin, did you have any more thoughts on that too? We were talking about that a little bit earlier before we came on.
The biggest thing, something that I try to do when I'm traveling, when I know I'm going to an event, is I'll tend to check in with the local practices or who's going to be there, because something I've been trying to do that's been working out is I have some thankfully wonderful people in my corner, partners and family that will help me travel for this. But usually what that means is I have to travel, say, on a Wednesday instead of a Friday, to get in town. So if we're having a local practice per se, like for example, the last time I was down for Mudthaw in March, I was able to go to Nutley before we did the event. So you can talk to us, hey, I'm coming down, I'm going to be at this event for this time, I'm coming from this distance, and you can try to set up dance cards ahead of time before you get there. And maybe you don't get to them all, that's okay, but at least enough people know that you're coming down to travel, that maybe they're watching from the sidelines, maybe you're getting some one-on-one time with someone you might not get to. So I'll try to look at events that are, yes, tournaments, but have the opportunity for pickups as well. So you can get that one-on-one time where, like you said, crown might not be the best thing because you might be out in 2 and instead of having multiple hours.
Yep. All right, Helga, I hope I didn't derail that too much for you.
You're good.
Okay.
So actually something popped up in the comments that I think is super cool to respond to, which is, do the Shiv ever talk about helping folks get better jobs? Like number of references in interviews, getting them into a better position. This is actually a pretty darn good thing, because yes, the answer there is yes, I have the job today because of a knight. And being like, you need to make better money to pursue this, so I'm going to be your reference and get you into this. Like, so I'd say yes. Make sure that you're also building connections in the SCA, because we have a very broad range of everybody that's employed. And so helping people get from one situation economically to another, we have those resources in the SCA and should use them.
Yeah, I got the same thing. I got my current job through somebody that was in the SCA. So yeah, that's definitely something we can be doing. The flip side of that is, yes, we can be available to help that, but how much do we get involved in somebody else's business like that? Like Soren was saying, it's like, I shouldn't have to know, what your hourly salary is. So, I mean, do I look at somebody and I tell them, it's like, hey man, you need to get a job that doesn't have you working weekends. So there's the question of how much we get into that. But certainly if somebody asks, yeah, we should definitely do what we can to send them down a different path.
So I think this is one of the perfect examples in which some of our chivalric virtues translate really, really well to a modern setting. And in this one, I'm thinking of particularly franchise, right? If you are the type of person who, if you need a better job or you have something to that effect, like, I work as a director mundanely, and I have a lot of experience hiring people, so I've sat down with my own dependents as well as other unbelts who are looking for better jobs, and then talk to them about those series of questions that they might be asked, or a better way that they can sell themselves. Be like, hey, this is the thing that makes you memorable, right? Because one of the functions of franchise is to make someone memorable, so that when they think of a particular thing, they think of you, right? So you're able to have a lasting memory for the interview process in order to potentially land that job. Similarly to when you are traveling as an unbelt, the function of heraldry, they're like, what was the guy? He's like, green bear cross, like that type of thing. You leave something for someone to talk about you after you're gone, right? So I absolutely think that it's something that we do on a regular. I know I do it personally, and it's something that I think that we can continue to do and advocate for, because again, we are a society. Like, so interpersonal interactions are huge, both in and out of game.
Well, and I think that kind of leads to one of the next things we were talking about. It's like Ryder was saying, it's like, what are they saying about you after you're gone, right? And that's what we call renown. And renown is that is one of those things that, like, that is you being noticed, right? People noticing that regardless of how far you came, or regardless of your economic status, what kind of lasting impression are you leaving? And that is, like, we touched on it earlier, that is extremely difficult for somebody coming from remote areas to make an impact, to get that kind of renown. I know we had, back in the early 2000s, we had one of our knights from up in Montana, who, he was running a family business, running a restaurant as a family business. And, he was not able to travel much outside of the state of Montana. But when he did, he had a tremendous impact. And he was one of those people that I'd seen for the longest time, that, like, you don't necessarily have to leave your state. You certainly don't have to. You're not required to come to the population center of the kingdom in order to have renown. It is more difficult, but it's certainly possible. And I think, to Ryan's point, is what kind of impression are you leaving when you're like, are you giving them a reason to continue to talk about you after you've left? And that kind of goes to what Thorin and I were talking about like making the biggest bang for your buck, and making the most of those opportunities that you have. And this also kind of leads into something else that we were talking about, with those particularly rural areas, is how do you get, rather than Thorin coming down to New England and trying to get noticed there, how do you get the chivalry to come up to you, and to give them a reason to want to go to you, to get to some of those struggling areas. So Helga had a little head tilt there. So I know when you were up in you started up in Quincy, I know there wasn't a whole lot of folks up there. Were you able to get some folks come up to see you?
Yeah. So one of the things that we did is we asked. And I would like to note that when you have a bunch of starry-eyed teenagers, you can talk knights into anything. You just have to punch their hero button. But also, one of the big things that I try to imbue in all my students is go ask. The worst thing they can tell you is no. And so by asking people to travel to rural areas, you start kind of punching that SCA hero button, which all knights, when they slap us, it's an automatic install. I would like to note, this is like, it happens. They install it right then. Now everybody else should be able to abuse that. And so one of the things that we could teach in rural areas better is asking, and then figuring out how to host. So like, cool, we can't pay your fuel, but we can make sure you've got lodging and you'll not go hungry. Can we talk you into coming up? And so making that space and inviting them, because here's the other thing. We're all neurodivergent weirdos in the SCA. The like neurotypical in the SCA, very low percentage, which means all of us are waiting to be invited. And so what I'd say, especially in rural areas, is go ahead and invite. And invite with what you can offer. You don't need to go above and beyond and pay for fuel and pay for flights and pay for everything else like that. Most of the knights at this point in time can figure out how to get there, or they'll tell you no. And so that's what we did, is in that little small area, is like, I am bold as brass and have no fear. And so I would just go ask them and be like, hey, we can make sure you've got like a place to sleep and a couch to sleep on. Would you come up and teach us? And we would get more people traveling than we had any right to. And so we still try to use that technique today. I'm just now subject of that hero button.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I mean, from an economic standpoint, you can, you can have like, Thorin can spend $500 on a plane ticket to fly down to New England, um, on his own, or you can get the 4 or 5 other guys that you have that each kick in $100 and buy a plane ticket for somebody else to come up and see you. And like I said, from being able to kind of share that burden a little bit, being able to bring in somebody that is willing to teach, like Helga said, I mean, those of us that have traveled this way to teach, and I've done it a lot. Bronos has done it a lot. Helga's done it a lot. I can tell you, this is not a money making endeavor for us by any stretch of the imagination. But none of us are independently wealthy either. So if you can cover my basic airfare, like people are like, hey, what does it take to get up there? Well, airfare and beer. And other than that, the biggest commodity that I have to negotiate is time. Is finding a free weekend, finding a weekend that is convenient for me to leave my family to come up there. But I've always felt that if somebody values enough what I have to say about our sport, that they're willing to cover the basic travel expenses for me to get there, I think as a knight, I'm obligated to accommodate that. So which kind of goes along with that hero complex that Helga was talking about, but also that's our job, right? We're supposed to be helping people. And rather than having one person break the bank to try to come down to the central part of the kingdom and to make an impression, get together, a handful of people in the area, share that burden a little bit, and get one person to come to you and share that information. And because the impact of that can be, I've done it a lot, and it's just been remarkable to me to see the impact of me being able to go and help other people. Just a couple of weeks ago, last month, I was up in Alicia. I see Sarah commenting there. I was up in Alicia. They flew me up there, and I talked to like 4 or 5 people, and that was enough for me. Right? There's no minimum crowd size that I have to have. I'll teach 4 people. I'll teach 40 people. I don't care. I just need to know that if I'm going to go somewhere, if I'm going to make that time effort, I just need to know that it's worth the time that I'm spending to get there. And that is not a financial benefit. I'm talking about, when I say worth it to me, I mean that there are people that are going to listen to what I have to say, are actually going to put the time in after I leave to actually work on some of this stuff. And people that are, disproportionately interested in their own well-being and their own advancement, right? And being better fighters. Because I don't care how good you are, and I don't care how good you're not. The only thing I care about is whether or not you want to be a better fighter than you are right now. That's all I ask. And that's enough to get me. If you just say, hey, can you come up here? That's enough.
If I could fall back onto the renown part in the remote areas, something I need to really get back at doing was videotaping practices. I don't feel comfortable videotaping slow work stuff and drills, but everybody understands that at practice you can get some fighting in. We can get on videotape knights from other areas. Other fighters can see where these up and comers are fighting, where they're fighting against each other, where they're fighting against the knights. And so that's something I'm really going to start pushing the back. But that's something we can do as Shiv is, if we can afford it, is to pick up or everybody pitch in and buy a GoPro. And you have free software that you can get it on the YouTube and be able to help the unbelts that way and to come through with their renown and just point it out. People are like, hey, well, they don't come to practice. Well, they can't afford to come practice, but have you checked my YouTube channel? To see them. So it's one way that we can help out that up and coming fighter who can't afford the $800 ticket to leave Alaska or anywhere else to go to Central. It's cheaper for me to fly to a different kingdom than it is my own kingdom.
Yep. There's that. Ryder, did you have any other thoughts on that?
So there's some technology that's available to all of us, right? So we all have general access to the internet. We all have access to smartphones, cameras, etc. So when we're talking about I'm going to throw everything in like corp speech because that's just the background that I have. So it's all about having both a cost benefit analysis and a return on investment, right? So like you said, like you could fly one of your knights up and they can teach and train a number of people, or like it would cost a lot more to send all those people down. The same is true for when we go to events, right? And when we go to anything where we're going to have that you're going to be traveling to locally, because we can all connect with one another over the internet. You can reach out to people, specifically members of the Chivalry, and be like, hey, I'm going to be here. Can you make sure that you give me a couple of passes? And as long as we know to have our gear and do that, I mean, that happens for me quite often with people who want to work two-sword or great weapon particularly. They'll reach out to me. And when I was an unbelt, I used to do the same. And I try and set up my dance cards, right, to go through, to make sure that I had that there. And that does two things for you, right? Like, so it makes the best of your time while you're there. So you get a higher return on investment. And it also shows the members of the Chivalry that there was an unbelt who's reaching out to them. So they're going to remember that to then take that home. So that's that franchise portion again, right? You left something memorable to that person because you showed an extra level of care for both your betterment as a fighter, as well as any other ones. I've been pulled aside for, hey, I really want to talk to you about the philosophy of knighthood. Not even just like hard suit, but like when we talk about the fighting on the path, but the fighting is just the thing that makes like the enforcement of our virtues exist, right? Like the whole point is to be a virtuous person and then use prowess as a method of enforcing those virtues. So all of those things go into you having the best return on investment and the best cost benefit analysis for your time. So if you're going to pick your events and you're only going to be able to make 4 events or 6 events in the course of a year, set up your dance cards, reach out to those members of the Chivalry, hit that hero button like Helga said, and make sure that they're there waiting for you, because we generally are happy to be there for you. We just don't always know to look.
Yeah, and to that point, I've had a very good friend of mine who I met strictly through the old Legio Draconis bulletin board, for those that remember the bulletin board days before we had the glory of Facebook. I get random private message, and the guy's like, hey, I'm going to be at Estrella. Would you mind if I get some of your time? And this was like 6 weeks ahead. He's like, can I get on your dance card? And I'm like, on my dance card? You are my dance card. Like, total random stranger, just out of nowhere, hits me up on the internet, says, hey, can I get your help? And you'd be surprised at like Helga said, I mean, yeah, that hitting that hero button, I mean, just that's so accurate. That is so accurate. Hitting us in the toe beans, right? It's like, hey, can I get your help? As a good friend of mine here was saying, it's like, you're telling me that all I had to do was ask. You'd be surprised. And I know that there's a lot of unbelted fighters out there who are resistant to reach out to a total stranger and ask for help. And one of the things that I see a lot, and one of the reasons that they are held back in that regard, is because they often don't feel like they deserve our time. And I'm here to tell you that's complete bullshit. Your brain is an asshole. That's your brain telling you that you're not worthy. We want to help. Yes, we have that hero complex, but also it's our job. We want to help. And sometimes, all you got to do is just reach out. And I mean, I've got people that I've connected with on Facebook that I've never met, but they hit me up, they ask me a question, and we have an actual conversation. And yeah, like you said, if you're going to be going to something, if you're going to be going to Penzic or Gulf Wars or War of the Phoenix or Great Western War, or if you're going to one of these interkingdom events, you'd be surprised at how receptive people are to you just reaching out and saying, when we get there, can I get on your list? Because when you make that kind of effort, like I said, you're not on my list, you are my list. Like, you become a priority because you made that effort. And it is that effort that really feeds that hero complex, and that like we are genuine. That's the sort of thing we're generally attracted to, is like people that are, again, disproportionately interested in their own success.
Can I actually just comment on something add on to what you're saying there, Sean? Is when we're talking about folks asking for fights, whether it's from Shiv, whether it's from upper unbelts, what have you, I know there's a lot of folks that, whether it's social anxiety, whether it's a lack of confidence, you guys have an issue coming forward. Everyone has the loud friend. Everyone has the person in their corner that can talk to anyone. And honestly, use us to help you meet other people. Helga's put it in, weaponized extrovert.
Yep, I'm one of those.
Yeah.
Like, anyone who knows me in the SCA, I love talking to people. I love fighting. I love hanging out. If you want to meet someone and you're like, oh, I don't want, that's Duke Sean, I can't possibly, come here. And we'll walk up and say, oh, Your Grace, this is so-and-so. Would you please give them a few passes? They've been looking to fight you. We'll do that all day.
Yep.
And we'll set up dance cards for you guys. If you don't want to talk to folks or you can't, we'll make it happen. We'll make that accommodation so you can still learn and you can still improve.
Yep, absolutely. And I think on some level, everybody has, has a connection somewhere. And you just, you don't know it. But that's why I just encourage you. I mean, don't think that we think you're not worth our time. Even if you don't think you're worth your time, you absolutely are. So yeah, sometimes just take a shot and just come up and say hi. Yeah.
So I think Mineko actually asked a fantastic question in the comments.
She did.
Yeah. How do you change the culture of the circle itself to discuss people more equitably in regards to recognizing someone who is working within their means?
It's a good question.
Brian, you want to start on that one?
Oh, it's pretty loaded. So one of the first things that I think that we, as an order, should do better with at large is understanding that whatever standards and metrics that we have are not monolith. And we very often will have a conversation. We'll say something like, "Oh, well, their stick isn't quite where we want it to be, but they do X, Y, Z other thing," right? And we sometimes treat that like we were making an exception, when in reality there are different paths to chivalry that, again, aren't all based around just the sword. Like, there's a minimum bar of entry, but when someone is overflowing somewhere else, like that bar for the stick can come down significantly, right? And I think that we should start to have more and more of those conversations when we do okay, well, what else do they do, right? And when they go, okay, well, this person is a natural leader, right? This person can rally those to their banner and is already supporting like their own small household. They're doing these other things, right? Their personal stake isn't there, but their students are already climbing, right? Like, those who can't teach, type of argument. Well, I think that we start to look at that person and be like, okay, well, that person is basically a knight. If it's something like they live in a particularly rural area, I know myself personally, I'm not going to hold a quote country knight to the same status that I'm going to hold someone from like a major population center. The East Kingdom is divided into 4 different geographical regions. The population density of just the southern region of the East Kingdom is the same as the entire nation of Canada. There's like 32 million people in only the southern region of the East Kingdom, right? So the ability for people to cross-pollinate and fight is significantly higher, and your ability to stand out amongst each other kind of goes down a little bit because, well, specifically the southern region of the East Kingdom, we're all, big loudmouth people because it's just by virtue of having New York City, Philadelphia, and the entire state of New Jersey. But so we should make note of those metrics and those expectations, and then also have an understanding that like our personal desire for that person or what we want to see of them may not be what we need of them as a kingdom, right? Like what the society is going to need of that person may not be where our level is, and be willing to listen and make those types of amends. And if there's anywhere that they fall short, I'm certainly of the opinion that it's your job to help them onto that jump.
Anybody else want to tackle this one?
I think it's talking positive about them within the circle, within the council, is saying, well, this is what they can do for the time being. They can't afford the $2,000 helmet. They got a $300 helmet, but they're doing all these other things. They're following, this. They're trying to go to practices. They're asking questions. Is being able to use that in a positive manner and bringing it to the council as a positive manner, so that we're not looking at it as a degrade that, well, they're doing all these things, but they don't look the part. Well, what do you mean they don't look the part? Why do they not look the part? Do they make the 10-foot rule? Do they make the 20-foot rule? It's understanding where they are, but how can we use that in a positive manner to forward them?
So I'm going to jump on the internalized bias bus. So in the West Kingdom, we have a very city culture and we have a very rural culture between two of our principalities. We actually have 3 principalities and we have outlying areas. And you can actually see speech pattern differences when we talk about the various different areas. In council, we actually have to call each other on those biases. So, they're just a rural fighter, or they're just, they're outflung far, or anything else like that. Those conversations actually need to get nipped in the bud much earlier. And we need to talk about the PLQs. So, like, are they a leader, as Ryu said? But maybe, like, we need to make sure that somebody's making him a nicer tunic or something else like that. But if a tunic is holding back somebody from being knighted, we ourselves as knights really need to address what that bias is. And what our definition of franchise is. Because franchise is not just what you're wearing. It's your renown and how you carry yourself. And we spout off all the time that you should be able to see a knight walking through a crowd, whether they're in mundanes, rags, or their best garb. So that means we can't hold them to a standard of, well, you must always be in your best garb or the best armor. Those are the conversations in council that we need to have. When somebody brings that bias up, we need to call that bias out. So, and that's the same thing with traveling. We as knights need to understand that we have to call each other out when somebody says, oh, well, they need to travel more. Cool. Are you traveling to them also? Are you traveling to that area? Have you gone and made the effort to go fight this person? Or are you expecting them to go to you all the time and put the money out to get there? Like, is this a middle ground thing? Those are the things that we as council need to call each other on. And we don't need to call each other on it gently, by the way. Like, the time for gentle call-outs has actually kind of passed. And we need to directly deal with, that's a bias, and you're applying it to this candidate, but not this candidate. So why?
Yeah, I've actually got an example in our reign a couple of years ago. We had a gentleman who was military. He was in the rural parts of our kingdom, and I really didn't know who he was, but as soon as I had a chance to fight him, I was impressed right off the bat. I mean, like, this guy's going places. And throughout that reign, we ended up recognizing him with our GOA fighting order. After he had been given an AOA fighting order in 6+ other kingdoms before that. And as it turned out, he ended up getting knighted shortly thereafter, and also just before getting PCS'd again, before getting another military move. And when we had recognized him with our grant of arms order, one of the things that we had told our chivalry was, you guys are on notice. If you don't know who this guy is, 1, you need to, and 2, it's your fault. It's your fault you don't know who he is. So if you're going to sit around and say, I don't know who this guy is, I'm telling you. I'm telling you who he is. and you need to make the effort to find out who he is because it's worth it. And that's a thing that we can do more when we see the good that's out there and we see the work that's being done out there. And to Helga's point, when somebody says, well, I just haven't seen him that much, well, that's your fault. And I think collectively as an order, that is something we can do is just raise awareness to those candidates and say, this is somebody you need to get out and see. And sometimes that means that we as an order, we need to make that effort to do that rather than waiting for them to come to us. For sure. All right. Lots of good stuff. Helga, did you have anything else on that? Or did I cover that?
No, I mean, that is definitely a soapbox one for me of just like, we need to deal with our own biases. Especially, actually, never mind. I totally do. Sorry, as a previous poor kid, I have to deal with my own biases of I made it. Now somebody else has to pass those same barriers to be valid in my mind. No one should have to pass the barriers that I did to be recognized, ever.
Yeah.
And so that is a barrier, that is a bias that I will deal with for the rest of my life, especially if I don't like a candidate. And so that's something that I can't weigh other people against. And because of that, that is a bias that I will deal with, and I should, and people should call me on it. So be better than your biases so we can have more knights in the society and we can have a better society. There we go. End soapbox.
Yeah, that whole idea of I had it terrible, so everybody else has to have it terrible too, that just doesn't float.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you had it terrible, what can you do to make it so that somebody else doesn't have to have a terrible experience getting to the accolade there? So,
she just took the words out of my mouth, and I'm nowhere near what the bias she had to go through, but yeah, it was definitely we gotta look at that a lot better. And call each other out on it 100%. I literally in this conversation was just thinking about what biases I have and my personal travel within my own principality. So
yeah, and I'd say that's a thing that is easy for you to being remote. It is easy for you to kind of get sullied on that. It's like you look at the folks in the Central West Kingdom who have access to all the things, and it's really easy to do the what about me sort of thing, right? And it's like, well, I had to do all this and I had to travel down there and nobody else can. I'm like, again, for us years ago, it was that the road to Salt Lake only goes one way thing, and it can be really easy to get bitter about what it took for you to get it. And I think, like I said, I think it's rather than becoming embittered by it, I think we should become emboldened by it and find out what we can do to make it easier for somebody else, for sure. I'm going to throw out one other question that came up just a little while ago. If I can get back to it, because there's a lot of comments that have come in since then. So. Let me see if I can get back to where it was. Where'd it go? There we go. What are the costs associated with getting an offer and being put on vigil? This is something that I've seen come up in various circles, not just the chivalry. But being offered the accolade should be a joyous time. It should be a celebration. It should not be a financial burden to be recognized with the accolade. And I think the way that our society is kind of, again, I think this is where we're kind of a victim of our own success. We get this idea that the vigil is this grand event in and of itself, and that it has to be this big party. And there are places like, I know in our kingdom, we tend to, like, if we're doing a food board for somebody's vigil, those are usually donations that are coming through. People are donating food and whatnot for that. But there are places where a vigil ends up being this gigantic affair, and it's on the candidate to pay for all that. And that really really should not be the case. I know we had, back in the good old days, there was a time when there was a lot of flyby peerages, right? The knighting on the field sort of thing. You pluck somebody from the crowd and you just, knight them right there. That's not happening as much anymore because the vigil and the accolade, it's, the ceremony itself is becoming more and more of an occasion, more and more of an event. And so I think that's something that we definitely need to consider and talk about, is like, how do we keep, the event itself, the accolade itself, from becoming a huge financial burden as well. Anyone want to jump on that?
So just speaking as the unbelt who's on this pathway right now, working just with the money, like I've put in a year, I just did up a rough number. Just one way, I've put about $1,500 in gas through my truck this year. Between the events I've traveled back and forth to, and that's not including what I've driven down there. So probably all in all, I'm probably $5,500 in, if not more, for gas back and forth. And working lower income jobs right now, I don't get there without help. So this is one of those situations where it's like, how do we talk to people again about getting carpools going? How do we've got folks, like, I am immensely thankful to my knight, his lady, and my household, because they've had days where I couldn't make it to something and they looked at me and went, here you go. Or we've got most of my Squire siblings are local to my knight, but we've got me up here in Canada and my other Squire sisters in Owertha, and we'll throw like money in a hat to help get folks where we need to go in the family. It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. All right. We're about 15 minutes out here. So I think we're going to start getting some final thoughts from our guests tonight. But I would like to say thanks to everybody for the great comments and the questions. And I'm sorry we weren't able to get to everything, but as you see, it's this is it's a big topic. It's a big topic. We, probably could have done a second episode on some of this as well. We'd like to thank everybody for tuning in, as always, and putting in your thoughts there. So, we want to start with Soren. You got any final comments for us?
Well, this conversation is a hot topic in many different ways. I'm very thankful for it because it made me do some inner thinking tonight, and looking forward to what I can do to help the future and the up and comers, and giving time and helping formers. Don't be scared to ask. As they were saying, come up, talk to us. No one here wants a sacred book. I'm going to teach you anything and everything I know within the society, fighting, outside of fighting, because I want it to be a better experience for you and for me. And so if I can teach you what I know, good and bads of what I've learned, then that's enriching the system. Giving time, helping out, teaching how to make things and on a budget. If they can afford $5, then help them buy a piece of leather, and start making armor and learning how to, or buy the stuff. So and how to move forward. I kind of lost my words here and kind of got deep into my mind here.
All the thinky thoughts.
My thinking thoughts are over my talking thoughts right now.
All right, Ray, you got some final thoughts for us?
So I just want to leave, on this note with really talking to two different audiences here, right? So for the unbelts who are on the path, remember to have your return on investments, right? Remember that, time is infinite. You are finite. Make sure that you make the best of your time, your effort, your energy, and in terms your finance. because that will help you ultimately, one, build your franchise within the society, and two, it will get you, the best bang for your buck, which will help you do this longer. And as I said, like you can talk to us. There's a certain number of resources that are available to all of us. We all have access to YouTube. We all have access to Facebook. Reach out to people. We like to be reached out to. Helga's hero button. That's absolutely real. And we're going to do our best for you, as long as we know that we can. As long as we know that you're someone who's interested. There's nothing we love more than seeing someone who's showing us that they're interested, because then from the knight's perspective, because we also are finite, we know that we're going to get a return on investment for somebody who is invested in their own betterment. They're not just talking about getting better, they're taking the steps to get better. So we know that the energy that we put into you is going to ultimately be better for you and our society at large. And then the second point, which is to the chivalry, as Helga said with the soapbox, we do have to have a better job of holding ourselves accountable, and look at things when we, so it's like, oh, this person hasn't been around. Okay, well, separate, is there a difference between a lack of willingness or a lack of ability, right? Start to have those conversations internally. Be like, I didn't see this person around. Start to ask why that was, because it's not always a choice. And in order to make good decisions, you have to have good decisions available to you. So that's my final point.
Wow. And Thorin?
Biggest one I want to say is, when you're on this path, regardless of whether you're making it to events or not, when you're at an event, make it the best bang for your buck, but also don't overextend yourself. That's going to do long-term damage. If you're at an event and you're fighting and it's a weekend event, listen to your body. Don't let one extra fight cost you 6 months of helmet time. You will be looked on far more if you have the sense to stop before an injury than if you try to literally work yourself into the ground to the point where you can't stand. So take the time, listen to your body. This is supposed to be fun. If you're not enjoying it, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Helga? You're muted. Of course you are.
I had to do it at least once. Every show, it has to happen at least once. Come on. So what I would say to our Unbelt community is, you can make it. Many of us have walked this path out of different economic backgrounds and different barriers to entry. The one thing that I will encourage you to do is talk about the barriers, and talk about them in a fashion that promotes conversation and invites the knights to help you address them. So I need rides. Like, I don't know where I'm crashing right now. I want to figure out how to make this event, but I'm not quite sure. Like, those things help deal with some of the small barriers. Or, frankly, I'll wash dishes if somebody will feed me. Those are starting points for that. For the unbelts, one of the tricks of the trade, crowdfunding and group funding stuff for each other. Like, that's how we all upgraded our helmets. And our entire group is like everybody's birthday with a helmet one year, because all of us could do $10 right at that point in time, but none of us can, afford $500 at any point in time. And I realize helmets are anywhere between $250 and like $1,800. But that's the amazing thing about the SCA, is use that group mentality to help lift each other up. For the knights listening to this, check your biases, be honest about them, and be open about them with the community, so you can address them and you can help the community address them.
Yeah, I'm just going to pop up one other comment that Mineko popped up there. We all say put real life first, and then penalize people in the circle for not being there. And that's real. And again, that goes back to those biases. And the whole point, that's I think kind of the whole point of this entire episode is, we as a society need to do what we can to make this accolade accessible. I've said for a long time that not everybody is going to get knighted. That's just a reality. It is a thing that is supposed to be elite. But of all the obstacles and barriers that exist, and the work that needs to be done to be good enough, fighter to be recognized, among other things, financial burdens should not be that should not be a thing. And I think we as an order can and should mitigate that every chance we get. And again, to be able to overlook those things, and to not, again, just to remove it as much as possible, so that we don't need this to become a rich man's game. I know, I'm not independently wealthy. None of us are. It's a hobby. We're all having a good time doing this. And that sort of the recognition that we all strive for and that we all desire, should not be bound strictly by economic barriers. So yeah, for the chivalry out there, let's do what we can to lift people up and to make things more accessible. Again, the loaner armor programs is one of the easiest things we can do as an organization, to make it more accessible for people to be able to get in there and get out and do this sort of thing. And for the unbelted community out there, ask. We're willing to help where we can, and that may or may not be financial assistance, but if you need us to come to you, I've spent my own money to go places to teach people, just because I knew that they were, again, as Ray said, we're disproportionately interested in your own success. And if I know that there's going to be that benefit, if I know that you're going to make the best of it, I'm going to make that effort as well. And yeah, when you are from rural areas or you have financial straits, make the best of every opportunity that you have. Pull your resources together with other people in similar situations, and let's try to help each other out. So, yeah, I think that's about all we got for tonight. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining in. Really appreciate it. Sivrid, as always, we appreciate you running the stuff in the background there, doing production for us. Really, really appreciate that. Part of our good crew that handles things in the background there. So I think we've got another episode coming up in a couple of weeks, and I'm sorry to say, I don't know what that is. Sivrid, do you know what we got coming up next?
Yeah, the one on the schedule is what a rain does to or for your fighting, and we'll have a couple of guests who are just coming off having sat on the thrones of the East and the Middle. So we have a number of coaches for that who will be coming in and talking about that. At least that's what's on our schedule. Hopefully, that's what actually happens.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah, because you have there's this mythology that once you are on the thrones, that you get all this time to go fight all the people, and yeah, Ryu's shaking his head. It's like, I know for me, when I'm reigning, the thing that suffers the most is weekly fighter practice, because that is the thing that is expendable. And it's the great irony of our sport that you got to be good at this sport to win crown, but then once you win crown, your time is not your own. So it's going to be a super great episode. Really looking forward to that one. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Cheers.